Okay, next thing what we do here in Maya, we are going to unwrap our mug. So for that, we don't need to see the plane or the lights, and we can hide those for sure. So just pressing H, I'm hiding the plane and the area light 1 and the area light 2. Pressing H, I can hide those. And then I select my mug. And I'm going to change my workspace to UV editing because then I can see the tools what I need for this unwrapping process. So under workspace drop down menu UV editing, and the UI will change this two screens mode. Here on the left side we can see still our 3D space, and we can move there as we have moved this far. And here on the right side we have our 2D space where we can see our 3D model uh, and its UV points. Next thing what we have to do is we have to create projection of our mark, so then we can change it, or we can modify it to be unwrapped into 2D uh, manner, and then we can get it exported into Photoshop so we can paint our texture. So first thing, you select the mug, and at this point it's also usually good that you go back to subdivision level 0. So press 1, and it's not smooth anymore, but it's easier to spot those edges where we are going to put seams in a second. So here in the UV toolkit, go to the section transform, create, section create, and click this arrow here, and then you can get multiple options how to create projection of our mug. If I select the mug and then I press automatic, it will do automatic UVs for our mug. That's an option, but that's not a good option because all the automatic stuff usually tend to do stupid decisions, and also in this case this is pretty stupidly unwrapped. So if you are in a super hurry, then I recommend that you use automatic unwrapping. Otherwise, I don't recommend it. Then the cylindrical projection, create this kind of end result. Definitely not for us. Spherical end result will be looking like this. Not for us. Planar. Well, this might be bit useful, but not the most informatic for us. So the one what I usually do here is the camera based, which also has downside, but not as huge as the other ones for this kind of object. Okay, now I have projection there, and the next thing I'm going to go on to the edge mode. So I'm on top of my mark. I'm pressing mouse right and selecting the edge. And first thing what we want to detach here on the 2D side from our mark is the handle. When we are doing the seams and cutting stuff, it's not happening in the 3D, it's happening on 2D. So although these two views are connected, they cannot mm, affect to each other, or they affect but they cannot transform each other. So that's why it's safe to select edges and cut. We are not really cutting the 3D or ripping stuff. So I'm going to select here these edges around the handle like this, and then I will go here on the UV toolkit cut section, and when I have selected those edges I press cut, and when I click on empty area I get edges deselected, and this white line here tells me that there is now seam wherefrom we can rip the handle off into this space. And the next thing what we are doing is the here same thing for the lower part of the handle, selecting those four edges like this, and then cut. And now basically if we come here on the 2D space on top of our mark and press mouse's left and select the UV and double click the handle and press W, we can move our handle apart from our mark. But now if I turn on the checker texture, you can turn on the checker texture from here. I turn it on and it, okay, handle looks, or the checkerboard looks nice from this angle of view, but if we change the angle or the perspective, here it doesn't look so nice and here either. So our main goal is lay this handle open to 2D so it will look, or the checkerboard will look symmetrical and not stretched, and it just the goal is that it looks same as in 2D image. So that's what we are aiming for. I'm turning off the checker texture here. And then I'm going into the edge selection. And now I'm starting to select edges starting from the white edge here. So starting from the seam and then just selecting these one by one until I reach the bottom seam. And I will create a cut here. So here from the UV toolkit, cut, And now we can see that it's cut. And I go to the UV mode by pressing mouse's right on top of my mesh. I double click the handle in the 2D view so I can select it as whole. And next thing what we are going to do is the unfolding. So unfolding basically means that we are going to rip those seams open, and then we will lay down our UVs. So under the unfold there is unfold, and now it unfolds our geometry. The thing what I want to do here in the 2D view is double click again my UV shell to be active, and I press A and I adjust my handle there. And now I can turn on again the checker texture. Until this point we have only modified these islands as a whole, but the thing what we can do here is we can also select individual points and move those. So the thing what I want to do is I want to get these edges to be straight. I will turn off the checkers texture. I want this edge to be as straight as this grid here. So the thing what I have to do is I will select these points, all of these points which should be on the same line here on the left. So all the points what are here. Then I'm pressing R, and now if I start to scale these on this x-axis, I can straighten those out and get a straight line for this. After that, I can select with tracking selection by pressing mouse's left the next line, and I can straighten that out. Same for the next line. And the next. And the last. Okay. Then if I want to do the same thing for the horizontal lines, I select those by pressing down shift and clicking multiple dots, and then I press R and just scaling down on y-axis, I can get all those points to the same level. And I can do this as well for all the points. So I select the points and scale those down to be straight. I'm just fast forwarding through this because it's very simple to do. Just press mouse left down and do the tracking selection, and then with the scale gizmo just drag it down. And here I have to do individual selection by pressing shift, and I can scale those. And then the last points. Like this. And now it looks really nice and neat. And if I turn on the checker texture, it looks really nice also here. So sometimes you have to straighten out your UVs. That's not every time, but sometimes it's good practice to do. The checker texture tells you a lot of need of doing the straightening. Then the unwrapping continues, and we are going to cut our mark base now vertically. But before that, we are going to detach the bottom of our mark from the base mesh. So I come down here and then just double click this here, and then on the UV toolkit cut, and going into the UV selection and double click and move this away. And I have the bottom part of here now, and I can actually unwrap it or unfold it already, and it's nicely unwrapped there. So unfold button here under the unfold section, just press it and it will unfold. After that, I'm going back to the edge selection by pressing mouse's right and selecting the edge, and then I'm starting to select the edges from the cutted seam. So this has to be connected, and then I go to the already cutted seam here, and then I make the cut like this, and then here, here, and here. Again, I connect two cutted seams already, and then cut like this, and then we have to separate the inner part of the mark from the outer part of the mark. So I'm selecting this edge here and double clicking it and just pressing cut. And now the inner part of the mark is cut apart from the outer part. And here I'm starting again to select from this cutted handle, and I'm going towards the seam what we have on the inner mug, and I'm cutting it like this. And lastly, we have two more seams to go. I will create another seam here inside of the mug. So just double clicking here and then cut, so I can get the inner bottom out. If I now change to the UV mode by pressing mouse's right and then selecting UV and double clicking this, moving my outer part and then moving my inner part and then my inner bottom part. Inner bottom part is ready to be unfolded. So I just double click that and press unfold. And it will be there now. I can as well open my outer part of the mug. So double clicking mug and then unfold, and it will unfold nicely. There is a bit of curve and we can straighten it out in a second. But before that, if I now double click my inner part of the mug and try to unfold it, it will show like this. And this is no good. So if I want, I can also select edges here in the 2D view. So on top of my UV shell, I press mouse's right and select edges. And now I just select two edges here. Actually, maybe these two. Yeah, these two edges, and I selected those edges because it continues to the inner side of the mark, the outer seam. And now I press cut. After that, I come back to the UV selection by pressing my mouse right and pressing my mouse right down and selecting the UV. Double clicking the UV shell and then pressing unfold. So you don't necessarily need to go to the 3D view. If you know where to cut, you can make those seams also in the UV editor. Before we arrange and scale this down, I think we can straighten out this mark outer UV line or mark outer UV island. Sorry, shell. So shift press it down. I'm doing tracking selections to select all the points on the same line, and then I'm pressing R and scaling those down on Y-axis and then selecting points again. Oops, forgot one. And then scaling again. I didn't scale it yet super straight because I want to select this next point here as well. And I'm scaling those right now. Scaling these. And then there is a few points what we have to arrange by hand. So just pressing W and then clicking points and moving these to be similar as we have those points or those forms here. So something like this. And this can be as well modified like this. And then the next line, it's fairly easy to select with shift and tracking selections. And then R. And R again. After selecting those, I'm not yet doing it super straight. But then I'm selecting these points and moving it quite close to be the form what we like. And at this point it's easier to select this lowest line first. Like this. And then just pressing R to scale it to be straight. Then the next points. As you can see here we are a bit overlapping, but it will fix when we have straightened out all the lines. So don't worry about that. And now I have selected all the dots and then scaling again. And then next points. And R and scale Y-wise. And the second last row. Oops. Scaling those. And I think I forgot one. So I'm just adjusting it by hand there. Nice. And then this last curved line. Just adjust it. And then I'm adjusting these points here a bit by pressing W and moving those into place. Like that. And the next thing, there is time to select these vertical lines and scale those like this. And I just continue selecting these dots individually. And then pressing R and scaling those on the x-axis. And now I can actually use the track selection and select those, and with R scale on x-axis. Select these and R these. This. And then the second last line here. Like this, and then the last line of scaling. And then actually these viewpoints, if you have UV map like me, have to be adjusted by hand like this. And now it should be looking super nice. We can actually check that in a second. I just will adjust these few lines like this. And now if I'm turning on the checker texture, yeah, it's looking nice, it's looking uniform, just the way we want it. And then the next big operation is to scale this down to this area here. So usually when we are doing texture maps, we want to fit everything here in the texture coordinate inside 1.0 on y-axis and 1.0 on x-axis. Currently everything is out of that area. So by double clicking outer side of the mark and pressing R and scaling it down and pressing W and bringing it on the area. Now it's inside and it's nice that the size is maximized. Then I'm bringing in the handle. There I can actually shrink it a bit like this. And the next thing what we are doing is we are scaling the bottom down like this. And then the inner bottom of the mark is scaled down like this. And okay, we can actually still straighten the inner part of the mark if we want to apply there some texture. But this is easy. So I just select all these UVs and pressing R. And then I'm just selecting these points here. Pressing or not pressing R because that's already selected, but scaling this on the y-axis. And the last line scaled down like this. And then of course y-axis once again. Selecting these points here and scaling those on x-axis so they are straight towards the y-axis. Okay, and now I will select all the UVs and scale those down. And as you can see, the inner mark is lots of smaller here in the texture area than the outer mark. And the reason for that is that I want to preserve more space or more texture space for the outer mark, because that's something what you will see like most of the time from the mark. So larger these UV cells are here is the same that more resolution is preserved for the textures. And inner mark doesn't need so much the texture space. Next thing what we are going to do, we are going to export these UVs to PNG format, and then we are going to open that PNG in Photoshop and add 2D image to this UV map, because it's now possible for that reason that we have changed our 3D object into 2D format. And this is how the most of the textures or all of the textures are done. All of the textures are 2D images. There is no really 3D painting, because you are always painting 2D textures at in somehow. If you want to use that texture later, of course you can just paint into the 3D surface, but you won't necessarily have chance to use that later on if you don't have UVs done. Okay, but for the exporting, press image, and on the top of UV editor image, and then there is UV snapshot. When you press that, you get the options window opened, and most important thing here is the file name. So where you will save your snapshot. So go to the desktop, or I go to the desktop, and then I save here UV map small mark and save. And image format, I'm changing it to PNG. I want this file map be 2K, so 2048, it's okay. And then just apply and close, and now we have exported our UV map. Next thing what you are all going to do is press Command S, and now it's saved. And at this point we are going to have 10 minutes break before we start to do textures, and after that we are going to still render today.